floor is yours. Have fun.
I think I'm gonna stay here because probably this one is better, right? Can you hear me fine? Ish, no. Yeah, my voice is quite low, so shout out if I'm not clear enough. Okay, sweet, perfect. Cool, so yeah, this talk is about, of course, Agile. So before having a look at the agenda, a little bit of information about myself. This is my Twitter handle. I'm Mattia Richetto, Italian, therefore my accent. I work for OpenTable, and we do basically real-time restaurant service. I like to consider myself as an Agile developer. So basically, the agenda is like this one. The talk is going to be divided into 3 parts, right? So basically, we're going to give you a little bit of context, a little bit about, Agile, what it is and why I like it. Then sharing with you my experience at OpenTable, what we do within our team, and then a little bit of idea in order to what to do next. So yeah. When we talk about Agile, of course, we need to start from the definition, right? So it is something relating to or denoting a method of project management used especially for software development and so on and so forth, which in my opinion, of course, deserve a confused Travolta, which is quite, like a little bit, I don't know actually what it is. And of course, you have to have confused Travolta in your presentation nowadays. When you talk about Agile, of course, you need to mention the Agile Manifesto. So what actually is on the left part, which is on the right-hand side, and then you see, okay, we need to put our focus on the left-hand side, actually in the first line in this kind of context, but actually, at the end of the day, we still need to do documentation, guys. I'm sorry about it. We need also to consider the Agile umbrella, right? So what it is Agile, and then we need to bring in the concept of methodologies. So we do have different methodologies, more rules, less rules, more prescriptive, less prescriptive, and so on and so forth. And then we need to mention also Dilbert, because of course people are actually thinking that we are not doing any kind of meetings, we are not planning, we're not doing anything, we're just, writing software. Actually, we do a lot of meetings. But at the end of the day, what it is Agile, in my opinion, I mean, I understand the definition, understand the manifesto and everything else, but what actually matters, in my opinion, is basically something else. And let me tell you a little bit story. So at some point, I wanted to deliver this kind of talk in my company, and then I said, well, I do not have any titles for this talk, so I'm going to just send an email with the title, Let's Talk About Agile. And then I received this kind of email from a colleague of mine saying, interesting, do you want to be more agile? To which I suddenly reply with, always. And this is actually what Agile is for me, kind of constantly improving, constantly trying, like to challenge ourselves. And of course, much more better than me, this kind of symbol, like continuous improvement, which is actually what matters. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I need to be Scrum, I need to be Kanban, I need to be DSDM, whatever. Let's try. Which means that I'd love to share with you what we do in my team at OpenTable, right? So a little bit of context, the team is like this, structured. You've got the point 2 because we do have shared resources like every other team, we don't have one specific designer within our team, so we've got some guy shared between 5 teams. Basically, I can say that the core team is about 6 people. And this is like the overall diagram of our kind of meetings. And yes, we are the company that does 20% time. So basically, what I would love to do now with you guys is like kind of highlighting meeting by meeting, let's say in this kind of pattern. So a little bit of definition, what I like and learn at OpenTable, what actually it is possible, in my opinion, to bring it in order to improve those meetings, and then yes, giving you some kind of additional ideas. So the very first meeting that I would love to talk about is, of course, the retrospective. Actually, I'm not following the kind of timeline order, because I think that even if you're not in an agile environment, you can still benefit from this kind of meetings. So for instance, like at the end of the project, at the end of everything, even for a post-mortem, you could use retrospective technique in order to facilitate it. Basically, we are doing it at the end of the iteration. I'm not talking about sprint, I'm not talking about cycle, because we are not kind of Scrum, so I can't say that. But basically, this is the definition of the meeting. So the retrospective, super simple. What went well and what needs to be improved. This is the picture of one of our boards after retrospective. So basically, what I liked and learned at OpenTable is that basically we use some kind of form of agile game in order to facilitate it. All of the games kind of trying to, help us to answer the question that you saw before. A cool thing is that normally I used to work in a place where we had Scrum Masters, or we had, some kind of agile coach that actually was the only person responsible for facilitating that kind of meeting. But it's quite cool if you are allowing all the members of the team to do that. So basically you will have always, fresh and new kind of experience and new ideas in terms of, games as well. And another cool thing is that at OpenTable we are able to attend our team retrospective, of course, like a passive, silent, kind of guest, without interfering with the dynamics, only in order to, grasp what they do and maybe apply the same kind of technique within our teams. But again, in a kind of, concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement, what actually we can do even better in order to facilitate these kind of meetings and keep them fresh. So, for instance, changing the format. So sometimes we are changing facilitator, but the format will be always mad, sad, glad kind of game. So it's like, but there are a lot of techniques that you can use. So you saw before the starfish game. You can, apply other kind of techniques. And another cool thing that I would love to do, but we are not doing, but I think it could be something interesting to explore, go to other teams retrospective as a facilitator and try to, help them in try to implement new techniques and doing this kind of stuff. All right, so what's next? Yes, of course, the stand-up meeting, quite controversial kind of meeting in my opinion, but I'm gonna tell you what we do. But basically, yes, we do Agile, we are Agile, so we do stand-ups, so it's all right. We need to answer those 3 questions done yesterday, today, and then if there are impediments, sometimes we forget about, answering this kind of impediments question, but this is another story. But what we do and what I liked and learned at OpenTable. So a cool thing is that everybody is pretty much, we already know how to properly conduct a stand-up meeting, so we always keep it short and focused. There will be always somebody, let's say, that starts, a discussion, but the other guy said, look, maybe you can take this offline, and so on and so forth. A nice thing is that when I joined this kind of particular team, we were doing Google Hangouts kind of stand-up meetings, because we had a bunch of people working, remotely, but then we decided, okay, maybe let's do this. The people in the office got around the one monitor and we put Hangouts on it, and then, there is the only guy working remotely on this kind of monitor, but actually we are kind of doing it in person-ish. Then we moved everything in person because we fired the remote guy. No, it's not right. And then now, at some point during our retrospective, people said, well, we don't get much benefit from this. I mean, I think it's a waste of time. What about creating an IP chat room? And now what we do is this. Basically, we post our updates on IP chat every morning, and we have got this kind of huge log of, updates. And it's like lean, short, keep. It works for us. I prefer in-person retrospective, but the team decided, so it's all right. So, and another kind of, let's say, improvement on this kind of meeting, which is, like I said, is pretty crucial in my opinion. We should always, make sure that it's not a status report. It's for the team and for the team only. And this is especially true when you do have, the in-person stand-up, maybe with your boss, your boss's boss, your boss's boss's boss, and so on and so forth. And that's why I like only have pigs and not chickens. So this is what I mean by that. Of course, we all know about this. So, who's committed, who is not. So let's say for the team, share and sync, done. All right. So next meeting, yeah, the planning, easy. We do it at the very beginning of our iteration, like everyone does. And basically, yes, it's as simple as that. We organize the work for the next iteration, right? So we pull the cards from the backlog, we put it into the sprint prioritized. The concept of prioritization is quite, of course, easy but tough. But by the way, this is another story again. But what I like and learn on OpenTable is that this kind of process is very collaborative. So basically, like we do have our product person in that kind of meeting. Of course, they said, look, we would love to achieve that. What do you think? And so on and so forth. So we cool. But the beauty is that they quite trust us. So if we say, look, I think that we cannot pull this kind of story in our sprint because it's too big. I think that is not, we don't have enough time there to say, okay, all right, this is good. We trust you. Well, let's try to do it next one. So a little bit of improvement, that's kind of controversial, but by the way, we started without kind of any estimates at all, and then we start introducing t-shirt sizes. I wouldn't recommend to do points anymore. It's quite an old-fashioned idea in my opinion. I quite like just counting stories nowadays. That's why I would love to bring, like the no estimate concept, but it depends. It's a big topic. I mean, I'm not going to cover it right now. What I actually think is quite beneficial is like trying to have a card with as many details as possible, like a lot of information, like wireframes. Acceptance criteria is quite beneficial. We are on the same page. I don't care about, like as I would love so that, because I mean, it's not make sense, but acceptance criteria I think is quite cool. Like you've got something to reason about, you can transform it into code eventually. And of course, one of the cool thing that when you do, for instance, the planning, you end up, like having people asking for questions and say, oh, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? And one thing is that if you would love to improve your planning, maybe it's a good idea to introduce a backlog refinement meeting, which we have done, by the way. But I'm going to talk about it later. And another meeting that we do, which is of course quite interesting, is the demo. We do it, like Wednesday before the end of the sprint, straight after the grooming session that I'm going to talk about later. But basically, what we do at the moment at OpenTable is that, yeah, this is the definition. Present the feature completed during the last iteration. This is a picture of us in the boardroom, in our boardroom, ready to be, ready to demo on a YouTube channel what we have done as engineers, and then we record the session, which is quite interesting. That's what I liked about this kind of practice, because we are recording it and it's available offline. We do have offices around the world, so we send the email with our kind of recorded demo. We can watch it and they do the same over there, and they will send the email to us, and so on and so forth. So it's quite cool. At the moment, in my opinion, it's pretty much an engineering initiative, which is okay, but I love, like to have, involved more product people there. But what I like is also that it's not only the demo that particular day during the sprint, but it's pretty much an ongoing process. So when I said we cannot talk about us as Scrum team, is because sometimes we work pretty much more in a Kanban kind of flow way. So our kind of demo is like, it's pretty much an ongoing process. So we finish a story, we present the story to the product person, the product person is approving it, is happy, we ship it, we're done. So it's more an ongoing process. That particular meeting is more, recording what actually we think is more relevant for us to share as knowledge within our company. But like I said, in my opinion, having sometimes, like product people presenting the story, demoing the product within maybe, like even designers, not only developers, it would be quite cool. And having in the kind of, like in the same room, stakeholders would be good. Now, this is applicable sometimes if we are kind of developing something that actually has got a physical user that we know about. But if it's like a website, it's quite tough. But I think that, watching someone that actually didn't develop the functionality, using the functionality and presenting it could be quite cool. Last meeting that we do, that we introduced quite recently, is the grooming meeting. We do it just, like before the demo, before the end of the sprint. And basically what actually this meeting does is like, we need to ensure that the backlog is ready for the next sprint, and actually enables us as developer to ask the question to the product people when we don't know anything about some particular kind of context, or we need more context, right? So we reason against, like our kind of board, and then we pick up the stories, and then we add stickers when we would like to add more acceptance criteria, or when we think it's like an epic story, or so on and so forth. So basically, what I liked is that we use it as a checkpoint, also in order to keep the let's say, our board and our backlog fresh. We decided that the whole team is not required. So we said, look, as long as we have all the product people relevant there, and there is at least one, representative for the development team, is all right. If we need someone with a specific expertise, we're kind of, like pinging him on HipChat, or we are just saying, look, can you come over and have a look at this and share with us your opinion. Is near at the end of the sprint, so that we have got, like as a product people, to have time to to gather the relevant information, which means that the next Monday, when the iteration starts, we can like have this user story ready to be pulled. So actually, it's important here is that, in my opinion, we need to have more input from product, because sometimes, like again, they are kind of, looking at the backlog the very first time during this kind of groomings, but in my opinion, it should be, from their point of view, a very much ongoing process. So, I mean, as a product, grab in the morning, open my browser, Trello board, we use that, look at the Trello board, reprioritize, add information, so that I've got, like all the relevant detail, and that I go to the grooming meeting pretty much prepared. In that kind of context, also, you can use this kind of meeting in order to discuss more engineering initiatives, and then you can add in there also, like you can discuss, for instance, technical story, where you can, like tackle, for instance, technical debt, and then you can share this with the product people and say, look, at some point we would love also to tackle these technicalities. I think it's quite good to do that there. So basically, this is it in terms of, like the overview of the meeting that we do, when, and definition, and so on and so forth. But I'd love, like, of course, to to try to give you some ideas, and we can, explore together. So of course, Agile is more than meetings. Agile is, like a lot of stuff, which means, engineering practices, which means, like specific topics such as stories, BDD, TDD, or I don't know, like anything. Even tools, nowadays, it's like, Jira-based kind of teams. Like I said, we use Trello and so on and so forth. So it's like a lot of stuff. So my idea is, in order to, like keep the ball rolling and try to, like foster this kind of communication and knowledge sharing between us, like could be, like more blogs, more community of practice, more meetups like this one, which I quite like. Agile London is quite cool, like a lot of people sharing the kind of same, passion, because at the end of the day, it is a passion. Then brown bags. So for instance, within your company, you just allocate half an hour of your time during lunchtime. You gather around, like a room, or you book anything. You say, look, let's talk about, I don't know, a topic that actually is like, I'd love to explore more. So within my team, we see that there is a problem during stand-up. Let's explore some other, like possibility, and so on and so forth. And the next idea is like hire me, but not in the very, like literally sense of the word. It's like more, if you would love to, well, of course, if you got, everything is possible, but get in touch with me, ask me questions if you got some. I'll be more than happy to share with you my personal experience, because I think, like I said at the very beginning, I'm Italian, and then I like to work smarter rather than harder, because at the end of the day I'm lazy, and this is what actually Agile helps us, and this is it from me.
Questions? Do you get any questions?
Question.
How long do your planning sessions usually last?
1 hour.
Really?
Yes.
And is that enough time for you to, obviously it is, but like, how do you get through all the reasons to your friends to do this?
Yeah, so 1 hour, sometimes even less. It's less nowadays because we introduced grooming. Thing is that at the end of the day, we are quite, like we know pretty much upfront what we are gonna do. So there's not much to, like to discuss, to reason. Normally, we are also, trying to give us a little bit of space with the possibility of having, of course, new stories coming during the sprint, bugs. Yeah, so it's all right. Please.
Thank you first of all, for a wonderful lecture. My question is, like you said, I think that's the major issue that most people are having, that the stand-up meetings don't work. And you say you've now decided to pass things so that people can read it. What I would want to find out is, how has that worked out so far for your team? And secondly, has it not removed the aspect of collaboration between among the team members, and also the opportunity to understand the issues some members are having?
Yes, so I'm going to repeat the question. He was asking about the stand-up on HipChat. On top of my head, you asked if it's working for us, and then if didn't remove the interaction and the communication, and how we, take action in terms of, sharing more information afterwards. So basically, yes, it's working at the moment. It's like the third sprint that we are having that. In a way, yes, I really believe that it didn't improve very much the communication. Like I said, I personally believe that in person is far way better, but I really also believe that the team should decide what to do. If it's working for the team, it's 5 people out of 6 are happy with that. I'm absolutely happy with that as well. In terms of further communication, I think that since we are sitting together in the same kind of space, if there is something that puzzles me, I will always reach out to the guy and say, look, I don't understand. Can you explain me? So basically, the communication is fostered because we are sitting together.
Last one.
Maybe that's the last one, actually. I'm going to ask then, the one thing I didn't see there is you mentioned you had teams who are based around the world, large organisations. Do you have some sort of coordination process, maybe scrums or scaling process to coordinate with them as well for the season or like?
There's no such a thing as a Scrum or something like that, something like formal. Nowadays, for instance, we know that, we are kind of having some kind of quarterly kind of goals. So there are particular meetings which are not pretty much agile, let me say, but are meetings where people are kind of saying, look, I need to implement this feature, I think, in the next quarter, so I'm gonna, at some point during the sprint, reach you out, because I would need your help, because we are touching, different code bases, not only my code base, but also, other teams' code bases, and so on and so forth. So everybody, at the end of the day, is aware of the fact that at some point there will be some kind of, request from outside teams. But, yes, it's not easy to deal with a team in the United States in this particular context, because time-wise is not ideal. Sometimes you don't have the proper face-to-face communication and this kind of stuff. So it's not that easy. Let's say that the very problem in terms of friction and speed and delivering a feature in production easier and faster is this kind of relocated structure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mattia.